2 seconds. We are live.
We'll call this meeting of the Finance Committee for November 15th to order. Attendance has been taken.
Yes, it has.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Separation of budget report items. Members of the committee, are there any items for consideration or consent that you wish to separate for discussion purposes? Councillor Van Tilburg.
5.2.1.
A second, I had a little trouble getting my information up. Okay, and I want to separate 5.2.2. Any other separations? Seeing none, can I have a mover and seconder for the items not separated? Moved by Councillor Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Hunt. Can we have the items to be voted on read off and call the vote?
Thank you. All those items that are subject to the vote are items 5.2.3, update to finance policies, items 5.3.1, third quarter casino update impact, and the minutes.
Thank you. Brings us to 5.2.1. Unfortunately. Oh, sorry. Call the vote. Yes.
Thank you. All those items not separated carried on a recorded vote. 5-0. All those voting in favor are Councillors Sullivan, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Martin, and Mayor Davis.
Okay. Unfortunately, the police chief's caught in traffic. He's running a little late. So with the permission of the committee, we'll deal with 5.2.2 first. That's one that I separated. Update on capital projects. And if I can find my. But before we get into that, can I get a mover and a seconder for the items that were separated? Moved by Councillor Sullivan, second by Councillor Van Tilburg. Okay, so the capital funding envelope, additional funding to replace the pumper rescue. What was the original budget for this item?
Todd Binkley, Fire Chief. Through the chair, the original budget was $950,000.
Okay, so that's a 50% increase. Wow. Is there any hope that the prices will come back down even slightly once the supply chain issues are dealt with, or is this the new norm?
Through the chair, that's really hard to predict with it's being driven by supply chain, the labor market, and the ability, the truck companies have to hedge their money over the build time of 3 years. So they make a guesstimate. So that's really what's driving the price of fire trucks up. So It's hard to say if it'll come down. Manufacturers are advising us that they're doing everything in their power to try to stabilize the market, but
Yeah. I know years ago, Tobico needed trucks in a hurry and we ended up going to E1 in the States because they had like a 5 or 6 month lead time instead of 3 years. So I don't know if that's something that you've looked at or not, or if they're in the same position.
through the chair, it appears that most manufacturers are the same for pumpers.
Okay, thank you. My next question, the golf operations are proposing to fund 2 projects out of the reserve. What is the balance of the golf operations reserve account?
Through you to Mr. Chair, Judy Moore, Director of Finance. The current balance in the golf operations with this transfer already taken into consideration would be $410,423.
Okay, so there's lots there for that. Thank you. Any other questions? Councilor McCurry.
Not a question, Mr. Chair, but there's a typo. It says Wayne Gretzky Golf instead of Walter. If we could get that corrected.
Thank you. Anything else? Seeing nothing further, we'll call the question on 5.2.2.
Thank you. Item 5.2.2 carried on a recorded vote of 5-0. Those voting in favor are Councilors Sullivan, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Martin, and Mayor Davis.
Okay, 5.2.1. I understand there's a presentation for this that wasn't planned ahead of time. With the committee's permission, we'll allow that to proceed. Whenever you're ready. Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. The chief is running a little bit late, but I'm sure he'll be joining me momentarily. He's just stuck in traffic right now. But I'll kick off the presentation and answer any questions as best I can. So unfortunately, I regret to inform you that the Brantford Police Service is currently facing a significant challenge with a substantial operating deficit projected in the 2023 annual budget. Despite the dedicated efforts to maintain public safety and uphold the highest standards of law enforcement, various different circumstances have led to a financial shortfall that requires immediate attention and collective action. As we navigate through these financial constraints, we remain committed to transparency and open communication with the community. In this update, we will provide a year-end projection, highlight revenue and expense items that are impacting the operating deficit budget, and outline the key factors contributing to the projected deficit. Your understanding and support during these challenging times are invaluable as we work together to navigate this fiscal hurdle and maintain the safety and well-being of our community. So as of October 31st, 2023, the Brantford Police Service was in a deficit of 1.17 million and is projected that at year end will be in an overall deficit of 1.6 million. This is a slight improvement from the 1.74 million deficit that was reported to the Brantford Police Service Board back on October 12th. Over the next couple of slides, I'll provide some further details on various revenue and expense line items, which will assist in providing further clarity as to what items are contributing to the projected deficit. So, revenue includes provincial grants, special duty revenue, fees for record checks, and cost recovery. Our projected year-end revenue is over budget by roughly 1.4 million, so we're expecting a surplus in revenues, due mainly to court, security, and prisonal and automatic license plate recognition grants that weren't budgeted. CSPT grant has historically been difficult to forecast, in the ARPR grant is likely a one-off that will not be expected in future fiscal periods. In addition, our wage recovery for secondments is over budget by $377,000 because of additional officers being seconded. Special duty revenue and report fees are also over budget by $189,000. So expenses includes payroll expenses, which includes full-time wages, benefits, part-time wages, and benefits and overtime. Other operating expense and transfer to reserves. Our projected year-end expenses is over budget by roughly $3.1 million, $2 million to overtime wages being over budgeted by $2 million, and other expenses over budget by $1.4 million, mostly attributable to equipment expense, armors, supplies, training, professional services, and education being over budget. It is important to note that some of these operating expenses will be offset by grants that weren't budgeted. Of note, the ARP grant and the revenue from the police college offset the operating expenses by $453,000. So on overtime analysis, the analysis of OT actuals versus OT budget shows that we have historically understated the OT budget. Over the past couple of years, that understatement of the budget has become material, as shown on the graph in the fiscal years 2021 and 2022. Based on actual experience in 2021 and 2022, the OT budget for 2023 should have been roughly set at close to $2 million. The budget for OT in 2023 was set at $930,000, a difference of just over $1 million, explaining half of the projected OT budget deficit. The other $1 million that is driving the budget deficit in OT is attributable to being short positions in platoons due to our inability to get seats at the Ontario Police College. And we're also short-staffed in other units, such as records and comms, as the service demands on the Brantford Police Service are substantial. To assist with the timekeeping management, the Brantford Police Service has recently gone live with a new system to assist management and oversight and controls of our labor resources. So the stated variance of the operating expenses is $1.4 million. But when you get net off the expenses associated with net budgeted grants, the adjusted projected variance is closer to $940,000. Of that, about $200,000 was the result of pistols needing to be replaced, but were not planned for. The remaining $736,000 is the result of poor financial controls or as a result of substantial service demands on our organization. Improving financial controls at the police service requires a multifaceted approach to enhance accountability, transparency, and efficiency. First and foremost, there should be a comprehensive review and update of existing financial policies and procedures to ensure that they align with current laws, regulations, and best practices. Implementing a robust internal control system is essential, encompassing measures such as segregation of duties, regular audits, and stringent approval processes for expenditures, which will require substantial commitment from all of those involved. In the 2023 operating budget, management did request approval for the position of quartermaster, which would be a person that is responsible for the purchasing and control of supply of equipment, uniforms, and other resources to the police service. We'll be bringing back this request within the 2024 operating budget to the Brantford Police Service Board. Something's wrong. It's not showing my. Okay, sorry, it's something wrong on the slide. It's not showing my full numbers. Okay, but I'll talk to it. No problem. The main component to gapping is the difference in a job rate versus pay rate. Gapping is a reduction to the payroll budget and should not be viewed as a contingency. Historically, the Brantford Police Service has not applied gapping practices to the operating budget. But in 2023, the operating budget, the gapping exercise was attempted, but we believe that calculation error was completed and furthermore was requested to be phased in by the Brantford Police Board, sorry. But in reality, the calculation we believe was an error, and the total calculation is not on the slide, but it's what was in Questica is negative 4.9 million. That's almost 5 million. Our calculation assumptions brings it closer to 3 million. The difference there is roughly about $2 million. So we believe that the there was a calculation related to the gapping exercise. When we go back and redo the gapping analysis, we come closer to a number of 3 million. The variance is 2 million, and that would have been a negative hit on our budget, given that exercise. So I'll answer any questions that I can with the chief missing.
Okay, Councilor Van Tilburg, I believe you asked for this to be separated.
I did indeed. A number of my questions were answered, but now I need answers to those answers. I see the overtime seems to be a significant factor in this. How are you handling that budget wise and getting an accurate guesstimate on your overtime?
Sorry, can you repeat your question? I think you cut off in the first little part.
Every year you've budgeted less in overtime than it actually is, and it looks like it's by a significant amount. So how is that getting under control now? And is there other ways to address the overtime issue?
Talking about overtime. Yep.
My apologies for the delay. I was caught in traffic. With respect to the overtime, this has been pointed out to the board that we can't continually look at past overtime, that we have to look to the future. I don't know if you have the document that Tarek's referring to, showing what we should be projecting at. So if the question is, how do we adjust for this moving forward? Can somebody clarify if they actually have that?
Yeah, that.
Yes,
So
we
if you
have
look
it.
at- Okay, thank you. If you look at that bar graph and you look at the line that's has a little star on it, that's the optimum of what we should be aiming for. And I'll turn it back to the CFO to continue on that.
So that's a new number that's in the budget that wasn't even there in September, or was that there in September?
No, that was not there in September. The budget was, this is just an approximation. I'm saying that the budget was understated when it was set last year for overtime.
Mhm.
It was set at 930,000, but given the historical experience, that was not attainable. It should have been set at closer to 2 million, because in historical experience over 2021, 2022, we were about 1.5 million and 1.8 million. So you follow the trend line. Overtime was going up, so you would adjust that closer to inflation, what you're actually seeing, to be able to, and then you would need actually management action to start to correct that. But wages
And
are going up.
Is overtime something that you want, or can that be incorporated in regular hours?
So we're in a unique industry. We're not like industry where we can slow down production. We don't get to control that variable. Ideally, do we want overtime? No. And I need to give credit to the board that one of the efforts to try and curb it was last November, they passed a resolution that would allow us to backfill if an employee has been off on WSIB for 6 months plus a day, rather than wait for the whole WSIB process to play out, making a designation, which is 2+ years. They would allow me the discretion to replace that person with a over complement member. So while the desired effect was that if we had those members in, then that would bolster our staffing there by eliminating overtime. The problem is we cannot get the seats at the Ontario Police College. So I applaud the board for the effort as one of the strategies to try and curb overtime, but we're at the mercy of the police college.
So
on
you
that
can't
one.
find the bodies now. Okay, I'm gonna leave.
No,
that so
I
let's
need to
get in-
clarify that. Sorry, Counselor, I have to clarify that. We have the bodies. We do not have a recruiting issue in the Brantford Police Service. The bottleneck is at the Ontario Police College, and I need to really point that out. I've
Okay.
asked, this intake is a prime example where I asked for 12 basic constable seats. I was given 4. And then in the 11th hour, I was given a 5th on standby. So we're consistently falling short due to factors beyond our control at the Ontario Police College. And I've asked the mayor to engage, and I give him credit for doing what he can to lobby. I've asked our MPP to engage. He's done a valiant job, but we consistently wind up being allocated well below the number of basic constable seats we need at the Ontario Police College that we're asking for, which would be one of the things to help curb this overtime.
All right, thank you. I'll let others ask their questions. I'm sure I've gone over time.
Councillor Hunt. You're still muted.
Thanks. Through the chair to the chief, I think you've answered my question, which is we don't have an issue with recruitment. So it's not a hiring issue. It's like a training issue. So they have to go through the police college in order to actually be active duty police officers. And so I'm going to go out on a limb then and say that we are not the only municipality that is experiencing significant budget overages related to overtime because they can't get the trained boots on the ground versus the recruits. Is that a fair statement?
100%. That's a very fair statement. You don't have to do too much Google searches to find a nearby service who's about twice our size has run into the same overtime issue. And so, yeah, it is that bottleneck at the Ontario Police College. That is determined by the director of the Ontario Police College, how the seats are allocated. They're proposing a new formula, and even the new formula won't help us address that gap because it goes by the percentage of officers we have in relation to the total number of police officers in Ontario, which if that formula is what's going to be used, would give us 5.5 officers per intake, and that doesn't help us. So that's where the bottleneck is getting officers to the Ontario Police College through their basic constable training so that they can come back and be part of the service.
What do we do with them once they've been recruited while they wait to go to police college?
Right now, we're relying on charm to keep them in our system. And this is what's frustrating is you have the mega services, I'll call them the Big 12, but in particular, the OPP in Toronto, who are guaranteed a very large number of seats at the Ontario Police College. We put all of the energy in to recruit them, go through the testing, background investigations, all of that. And then we have them ranked in an order to go to the police college based on the number of seats. And if we don't get those, we're relying on, hopefully they've bought into us. Some we're trying to steer towards our special constable programs where we have 3 layers so that at least they're part of our system. But I don't blame these young people that a lot of them are saying, you know what, I want my career. And if Toronto or OPP can give me that because they have the seats, that's where I'm going. So a lot of it's goodwill and trying to steer them towards these, I call them the feeder leagues, the special constables, so that at least they're into our system, paying into the pension. But a lot of that's goodwill on the part of the candidate.
Okay. And then my other question is related to the budgeting error. That was just something that's only happened this year. And so this $1.74 million projected deficit is fairly reasonable to assume that is a result of the budgeting error.
Through the chair, I think there's different factors driving the budgeting error. I think that's one element. Of the deficit. The budgeting error is one element, but there's different factors. We've obviously, on the revenue side, we didn't forecast enough revenue, so that was a surplus. And on the operating expenses, well over budget too, driven from OT expenses, and some other operating expenses were also higher than expected. As I mentioned, some of that was unexpected needs arose, and we had to meet those needs. Some of it was a result of poor financial controls. Realistically, we didn't maintain those controls as we should be, and so there's different elements driving the deficit. It's not just the one error in itself.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sullivan.
Just looking for some clarification on this through you, Chair. Chief, do these officers that are in the recruitment process, do they choose their destination, or is the college choosing it for them based on needs?
Through the chair, they choose their destination, so they can apply to several police services at once. And then whoever is the first to offer them the opportunity to go to the police college is quite often where they'll go.
Okay, now, do we ever have any issues where they come under the pretense that they're coming to Brantford and then all of a sudden change their minds while they're in the schooling?
Periodically, we've had that happen recently where somebody was in our system. We were confident they want to be with us. They did want to be with the Brantford Police. But I don't blame them. They're done their post-secondary education. They want to start paying down their student debt. And one of the Big 12 was able to offer them the opportunity to go to the police college, so they jumped at it.
Well, maybe that's something that the province has got to fix and make it so that they can't jump once they've signed up with a particular district. Thank you.
Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Chair, through you. What was the overspend the last 3 years for each year?
That are overspent in the total budget?
Yes. Actual to budget.
Sorry, I don't have the historical numbers from last year. Not on me. So I don't believe from what I saw before that we've ever had a budget the deficit this big. It was closer to actuals were closer to budget. I believe last year was 300,000 from what I recall from memory of a deficit. And then before it was effectively pretty flat to budget.
All right. And what was the percentage increase in the approved budget from 2022 to 2023?
7.91%, just under 8%, I believe.
And the year before?
I don't have that in front of me, sorry.
So am I to take what you've told us that setting a budget increase at 8%, we should have set it at 9 or 10%? Or not us, but police services should have done that?
There's different elements impacting the budget. I think the OT is a factor. The OT should have been higher.
Okay, well, I'm thinking back to last year in the budget process. I don't think anybody said to us at City Hall, oh, we're under budgeting. Did anybody say that to us when you came presented? You weren't here, but when the budget was presented last year, I don't recall it.
So through the chair, as you're aware, we present our budget to the board initially. That's where those conversations happen. It was discussed about the need to reflect overtime rather than being based on historical trends. And like I said previously, the board offered a solution of allowing us to replace people that are on WSIB 6 months plus a day that previous November. And so I believe the board was well intentioned and we thought it would be achievable of getting those people in position so that we would alleviate the overtime. The other factor that none of us anticipated was the rate of inflation. So that I'm going to rely on the financial expert, how one would be able to predict that.
Well, I seem to recall last November, the inflation rate was running at around 8%. Now it's less, a lot less.
It's definitely come down. Sorry, through the chair, it's definitely come down. I think right now it's around 6%, but it's closer to 4% if we're talking about on the month to month change. I usually look at the annual average, and that was, I believe, closer to 7% this year.
All right, so you agree though that when police services came to the city estimates committee last year, there was no warning given to us or an asterisk on the budget that, you know, gee, we've made an assumption here and this may not be correct. This is the first time we're hearing of it. Is that right?
So in fairness to the current CFO, if we want to have a more robust discussion, I think the appropriate thing would be to let's adjourn this meeting and then we'll see if we can have the past CFO. I don't recall verbatim the conversations that were had here. I'll have to look on.
All right. Well, different approach through you, Mr. Chair. Why are we hearing about this the 11th hour? Why haven't we heard this month 6, like back in June or July?
Sorry, through the chair, I started in the second week of August, and I didn't get set up with the financial reporting system until probably the 3rd or 4th week of August. So it was just given 1 or 2 months, it's difficult for me to report on the drivers. I could run a report on the variance, but I could actually explain the drivers like I can at this point in time.
And
Well-
through the chair, if I may add, our previous CFO, because of a number of circumstances, his departure was relatively quick. So there was not an opportunity to have overlap between when he ended and when our new CFO started.
Well, most of the boards I've sat on many in the last 40 years, generally, at least on a quarterly basis, board members are given a projection on the year-end budget. Are you telling us that didn't happen then until this past September?
So
Like 9 months into the budget year?
So through the chair, the first opportunity I had to report on a quarterly budget was in October.
So prior to that, since January, there have been no quarterly budget projections?
I believe not, no.
So
Through
would
through
you?
the chair, I will need to confirm that with Mr. Ali. I do believe, and I'm gonna have to lean on Chair Martin, who was vice chair, I believe, at the time. I do believe there was regular financial updates to the board. The interval, I can't quote, and if we want to take a recess, I can reach out to Mr. Ali to get that information.
Through the chair, and this is said with respect. As the chief, are you not ultimately responsible for all aspects of the police services, their budget and their budget performance?
As the chief, I build the budget. However, as you're well aware, that's done in consultation with the board. My observation has been, there's always been a wanting to do a lot of things based on historical trends. And that's not to say that we did not get increases. We definitely did get increases for certain projects like the special constables. But when it comes to determining overtime, there was always a pressure to try and look at historical trends versus the reality that the city's growing, the dynamics are growing and changing. And the other part of this is when our current CFO talks about the lack of financial controls. That's why I went to the board when I first arrived here saying that we need a CFO. The budget is far too big for to have a police officer doing that. The traditional role of the Brantford Police, we had an inspector doing it, and in no way am I being disrespectful of that person and their skill set. But as police, that's not our wheelhouse, which is why I asked Mr. Ali, the board for a CFO. We hired Mr. Ali. And one of his early comments was there's a need to really build financial controls because they're non-existent. And I saw that when I came in with Mr. Al-Ahmed. Now he's made the same comment that Cameron started the work, but there's a ton of work. And with all due respect, the observation of Mr. Ali was that those controls creep over to the city side. There's a lot of things that are done in paper-based or not much more advanced than paper-based systems. So I inherited a police service where a number of financial controls were essentially non-existent or paper-based, which did not allow efficient auditing. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Al-Ahmed if he has any additional comments on that.
Yes, through the chair, what I've experienced in my 3 to 4 months at the police service is, as the chief just mentioned, a lack of a framework of a robust controls system at the police service. As I mentioned in my presentation, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to modernize the police service. So we're up to date on financial controls and governance as related to finances. That's something that I'm committed to doing. One of the things that we're currently doing right now is updating the in-time management system. We just went live last Sunday, on a new system will give us better oversight and controls of labor resources. In addition, we also need to focus on updating policies and procedures and also educating staff on financial best practices.
Mayor, your time's up. I could put you on the list again for a second time.
Well, so as a, sorry about this.
Isn't technology wonderful?
Yeah. Jeez. So, but this is a presentation, aren't we? Isn't there 10 minutes allotted to?
The presentation's over. We're at
All right, put me down on the
Questions?
second speaker list. Second
Okay.
speaking up.
before I go to Councilor McCurry, I have some questions. Chief, did you not explain to the board that the overtime because we allowed the hiring to replace. We allowed the hiring, did you not explain to the board that the overtime numbers that were budgeted were appropriate? Because the board give you permission to hire to replace officers that were off on WSIB for 6 months or more?
Through the chair, at that time, as is just now, we can't predict what the overtime, we can't predict if we're gonna have a major event, multiple murders. What I did say to the board is it would be a factor in helping to curb it. And I applaud the board for seeing that we needed those bodies. So had we been able to recruit those bodies and put them to the police college, then it would have been effective, but nobody saw the bottleneck at the police college. So would have the additional officers to counterbalance those off on WSIB addressed it? Yes. However, we have that bottleneck. Then there's the extraneous things that we can't control. But yes, I did say to the board that I agreed. If we move that direction, it would help address it. We did not see this happening with the Ontario Police College. And to Councillor Hunt's comment, we're not alone in this.
And how many are you short-staffed now?
Short staff.
Through the chair for clarification, because of WSIB or in general?
In total, for both?
Just a second. So through the chair, it appears to be 16, and that's not accounting for people that are on maternity, paternity.
Okay, so if you could send 16 cadets to the school tomorrow, you would do that?
Yes.
Okay. In the presentation, did you say there was a surplus in wages?
Sorry, through the chair, it is. In full-time wages, there is not a surplus, it's a deficit.
Oh, I thought your presentation showed a surplus. Okay.
Sorry, through the chair, there's different elements of full-time wages, so we would have to combine full-time wages, benefits, part-time wages. Doing the quick math, there is a slight surplus in the total when you're talking, including benefits and wages. And that's going back to the financial projection on slide 2 of my presentation.
So that's a surplus for year end?
Yes, projected surplus for year end, yes, sir.
So that's all wages, full-time, part-time, benefits, full and part-time.
Yes.
Okay, just looking at full-time wages, the fact that you're short 16 officers, there should be a surplus there. You should have spent less than what you were budgeted for with not having to pay 16 officers.
So through the chair, I think the gapping analysis, the calculation I mentioned in the beginning, I think that removed that surplus that we were expecting. As I mentioned, that we believe that calculation was done in error in Questica, and our calculation estimate was different by about $2 million. So we believe the gapping calculation that was actually in the budgeting system was done in error.
Okay, that still doesn't make sense. Because we increased the budget for full-time wages to go to the system of accounting for second and third class officers at first class wages. We're going to phase that in over 5 years. So there should have been an increase in that budget line, and yet you're short 16 officers. There should be a huge surplus there.
There should be if the calculation was done correctly. The calculation was not done correctly.
Okay. How much is the budget for full-time wages increased from the previous year?
Through the chair, I don't have that in front of me.
Okay. Councillor McCurry.
Sure, thank you. Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming today. Would staff, may I just say, would staff keep track of the questions asked for which there was no answer possible today and have that submitted in writing to them to provide us with answers later? Yes, thanks for coming today. How many officers left our employment so far in 2023?
I will have to. Through the chair, I'll have to get that number. In 2023, off the top of my head, I can think of 3. But I'll have to confirm that number.
Okay, thank you. How much did we spend on legal fees this year to date?
So this may not, sorry, through the chair, we account for professional services. And that was over budget by 99,000. I don't actually have the actual number for legal services. But we know we were over budget by that GL line by 99,000, almost 100,000.
Perhaps there might be an opportunity to have these folks return to this committee at a later date, prepared to answer questions with information that's should have been anticipated, would be asked for. So can you explain how you overspend meals by $111,000 and vehicle leases by $65,000? You mentioned that you had to buy new pistols. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
That was not in the budget?
No, they were having catastrophic failures in the pistols themselves. And so that was to meet adequacy standards. We have to equip the officers with with the pistols.
Was that done with the knowledge of the board?
Yes, it was.
And that was done all in one purchase?
I will have to confirm if it was in one purchase or if it was spread between 22 and 23.
Did the Bradford Police Service recoup the expenses incurred in the prior year, providing officers to the city of Ottawa for, I don't know, a week or 10 days or whatever?
To respect the position of the board, this was asked in camera at the board, and I endeavored to get them an answer. So I have to respect my processes in that. So I think I have an obligation to respond to them first, since it was asked at the board level in camera.
It's not asked here in camera, and simply it's a question that really requires either a yes or no answer. There's nothing privileged about a yes or no answer.
I need to confirm where the status is. The board asked this exact same question, surprisingly. And so
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
it's been many months since the trucker convoy happened. So I just found it ironic that it was being asked so many months later, but it could be.
Perhaps it's because we're finding out now that you're way over budget and we don't seem to have any concrete answers. So you should expect questions that are perhaps more probing than simply buying into the explanation that you didn't have enough in your budget. Did you not have enough in the budget for meals?
Meals is a whole different issue. I'll turn that back over to the CFO that treads into contractual items.
Yeah, so through the chair, meals, as overtime goes up, it starts to impact the meal expenses as per the contract.
Mhm.
So that's one of the major factors why meals would be up, but also, as I mentioned in my presentation, I do believe there's a lack of controls and monitoring. So that needs to be improved to actually ensure we maintain the budget going forward.
Yeah, I could certainly see that, sir, and I welcome your joining the team. There's a comment made earlier that the old system lacked financial controls, but I must say when the staff, the sworn staff put together the budget, no one came in here in November telling us that they'd not kept track of expenses. Lease vehicles, could we explain that one, sir, please?
Through the chair, so part of that is because of supply chain issues, we were not able to purchase new vehicles. So we had to extend the leases on existing vehicles. So we had enough number of vehicles to equip the fleet. The other part of that was covert vehicles. We received a grant for a covert unit. We have another covert unit and their vehicles. I I can't get into the specifics, but there were dynamics at play where vehicles had to be changed.
Does that mean that there was a cost saving with respect to purchased vehicles since you weren't able to get them?
Sorry, can you say that again, please?
You extended the leases on vehicles because you couldn't buy vehicles. How much money did you save in not buying vehicles?
So we'll have to get back to you on that. Again, these are some questions that we need to connect with our former CFO, Cameron Ali, because the board had asked us to, for a number of years, to look at drift away from leasing to going to purchasing, but it was
half
not
and half.
doable.
The goal was half and half, correct?
Pardon me?
The goal was half and half.
I can't say definitively off the top of my head, but I will have to check with Mr. Ali.
So we had 277K with respect to secondment. That was additional revenue. Yes, wage recovery secondment, 277K to the good. Now, was there also a corresponding increase to our wage costs to replace the officer who was seconded? And would that be in the overtime account?
Sorry, through the chair, are you referring to the 377,000 quoted?
A wage recovery for secondment increases by 277. It's third line in your revenue explanation.
I have 377.
I have two. Perhaps this explains some of our problems. If we have different numbers. Anyway, the question, the gist of the question is the wage for the officer that replaced the seconded officer, where does that wage appear in your financial summary? Is it in OT?
We're not quite grasping your question. If you can try and rephrase that, are you talking about like we get the wages recouped?
You got an
Your
extra,
time is up, but I can rephrase the question for you. Did you have to backfill the position for the person who was seconded?
Yes,
Where does that cost show up?
that would just be in
Wages.
normal wages. So that's where I've asked HR to come up with a chart, if you will, as to who's seconded where and where we're at in attempting to backfill these. Because again, we do know that we have to backfill these. So some have been backfilled, say our secondment to the OPC that's been there for several years, that would have been backfilled. The more recent ones, because of this dynamic with the basic constable training, would not be backfilled. But I can get a more definitive breakdown of that and come back.
So
with
only
it.
some of that was backfilled.
Correct.
Okay, Councillor Caputo.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible if I could put a motion in to, we can stop this meeting here tonight and have this panel of the committee put together a group of questions, as Councilor McCreary was talking about, or you were talking about, that we can reconvene and have this meeting where we would get answers from Mr. Ali and at our next finance meeting. Is it possible?
I think Councillor McCurry's request that the questions that don't have answers be supplied to the police department satisfies that. If you want it to come back to finance committee next month, that can be the mechanism for getting the answers.
And that's what I'm looking at doing, because I think there's a lot of questions that are being asked here today and there's not a lot of answers that are being brought forward.
Yep.
And if we're in need of having a CFO that was previously employed to be able to answer those questions, let's get that in place. And at least we'll have some concrete answers, because right now I'm not very pleased, to be honest with you, with what I'm hearing in terms of what's coming to the table, in terms of us having to get into a reserve for almost close to $2 million, and we're not really prepared to speak to it.
Okay, before we defer this to the next meeting, I think we have a need to get any additional questions out so that we get all the answers that we want next month.
I was kind of hoping we'd be able to convene as a group, but where we can put together a group of questions to have those answers.
I think most of the questions are coming out tonight, but if you have any additional ones, we can forward that to the police department to have the answers for next month.
Okay.
Mayor Davis.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. You know, I want to make it very clear that we at City Hall, we have no control, influence, or oversight of Brantford Police Services. That comes through the chief, the deputy chief, the inspectors, the financial officers, and of course, the Police Services Board. So our job here at City Hall is to fund police services and raise through the property tax system the money that's required to fund the police services. And frankly, I think we've done a pretty good job of that here at City Hall the last 5 years. Any request that has come to us from police services, we've honored it and we've raised the money. And right now, about 26% of the tax dollar that we collect goes to Brantford Police Services, 26 cents out of every dollar. And that's one of the highest percentages in the province of Ontario for cities our size. We have, in terms of the number of police officers per resident, it's in the top 3 for the province of Ontario amongst cities our size. The amount of money we spend per resident on policing services is in the top 3 in the province of Ontario for cities our size. In fact, we spend 3 times per resident in the city of Brantford than what residents in the county of Brant pay for OPP policing. So there's not a question here of City Hall or the city council failing to collect sufficient money through the property tax system to fund the expected cost of police services. And so, you know, what do we expect in return from police services? Number one, we expect a high level of policing and quality of policing. And I'm proud to say that, and Chief Davis, I think you should be proud as well. Your service is doing a fine job. And we've seen in the last year or two, some great work, guns and gangs and drugs. Seems like every week there's report of a seizure of significant quantities of drugs and guns. And we've actually seen this year, there are no homicides, which I think speaks to the effectiveness of what police service has been doing over the last several years. So that, I mean, that's all great. But at the same time, there's a second thing that we expect from our police services, and that is, you know, fiscal responsibility, fiscal discipline, respect for the taxpayer. And, you know, I can understand that it's hard to predict overtime. Situations happen where the priority is providing policing services and protecting the public. I get that. I can understand how it goes over from year to year. But, you know, meal expenses over budget by 111,000. Professional services, which is, I guess, for lawyers and other experts, 65,000. Equipment expenses over budget by 50,000. Software licenses over 40,000. Lease expenses 65,000. Uniforms and clothing expenses 76,000. Armor supply expenses over budget by 150,000. And I understand inflation's been a factor, but the time the budget was set, inflation was already a big problem here in Canada and here in Brantford. Last year was running at around 8% at this time. This speaks to, and I think it's been acknowledged by those that are presenting tonight, a lack of or a need for better budget controls, because when you're running over budget on so many line items, you should be picking this up early on in the year and taking steps to address it by reducing the expenses and the purchases in those line items, because otherwise it kind of wreaks havoc with our budget here at City Hall, because you know, we can't run deficits here. And so if there's a large budget deficit in one year, we have to make it up in the next year in the property tax system or raid the reserves. And we can't print money like the feds or the province and run deficits. So this has major implications for us. And, you know, so it's disappointing that we're not getting all the answers. And clearly there are some concerns. I think they're legitimate. I sincerely hope that the board and that senior police management are putting in place the kind of controls that where this you know, won't happen again, and or if we're in another trend line of going over budget, that it's caught early and appropriate steps taken early in the budget year. But I did want to confirm, Mr. Chair, that money aside, I think our police services have done a great job in the last year or two. And you know, we're seeing the impact of the officers downtown. It's definitely having an impact. So it's not all, it's the money issues are a concern, but certainly in terms of the policing services being delivered, we're getting an excellent level of service, and I want to thank the police service for that. Let's see if we can get the budget controls in place so we're not repeating this and reliving this again next year.
Thank you, Mayor, through the chair. I do appreciate those comments, and I just received, I asked Cameron Ali about the quarterly reporting, and so he has responded. He can't go into detail because he's has his current work commitments. But I asked if you did you deliver any quarterly financial reports to the board, and he's responded, yes, they are all in the agenda listed online. So I cannot recall who asked, that made aware of getting regular financial reports. The answer is yes. He said even the last one before I left. So he did present one at the last meeting before he left. So those are, I cannot recall who asked the question, but Mr. Ali did provide financial reports to the board.
Okay, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. And so I guess the questions, I'm looking actually at our staff report. So Joelle, or Judy, I guess, the report says that there are 3 options to fund this deficit. So obviously, one being we add it to the 2024 budget, draw from police reserve, or an additional draw from the city's corporate contingency reserve. It does go on further to say that the report provided to the Brantford Police Services Board did not include any recommendations on how it would be handled. And I'm guessing at this point that then perhaps was there discussion, I guess, at the Police Services Board on which of the 3 options would be. I think probably the least popular one is going to be by adding it to the 2024 budget. So, and again, I guess we're a little outside because our staff doesn't look after this. So we're a little outside, so maybe these are questions that also get added. So my other question is then how much is in the police services reserve if it was to be funded from there? But I feel like we're looking at it without full information from the Police Services Board in terms of what direction the Police Services Board is going to be given.
Through the chair, that question wasn't asked at the last meeting when the report was presented, but our reserves are at $300,000 and it wouldn't be sufficient enough to cover the projected budget deficit of 1.7 million almost.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, my question is, did I hear correctly that you were planning to put someone in charge of stores capacities and those issues in order to control supplies?
Yes, through the chair, that was a request in last year's budget for a quartermaster. We'll be bringing back that request in the 2024 budget.
And what type of position is that? Is that what's the requirements for someone to apply to that? Do they have to be a constable or such?
Through the chair, that would be a civilian position.
Civilian position. Okay, thank you. And I want to move away from that now. And just give me a minute, please, if you could. I'm sorry. Brantford had a bad headline recently in national news, and that was that we had become one of the top cities for homicides. And I just want to thank you. I'm sorry again. for bringing justice to a murdered member of my family in the last year. And if you could for me, because I know how much time was involved in that, starting from nowhere. If you could bring back all the hours and manpower that you had to use on all those homicides. I know when I was taking calls and there was areas being neglected in the city, it was being told that you were looking at homicides. And so while I'm telling my constituents that you can't take care of some of the other important issues to them, I knew you were taking care of something that was very important to me and members of my family. So if you could bring back what those overtime costs were, the expenses, the meals and all that, including, because I know that homicides take a lot of resources, and we didn't, we did jump to that state overnight. And I've noticed that those numbers have dropped dramatically. And I know that's from your good work in getting at things before they happen. So if you could do that when we ask for that, and I'm sorry.
Councilor McCurry.
Sure, thank you, through you. Guys, last year there were a number of positions that were approved by the Police Services Board, which were not sworn positions, but rather they were administrative back of shop type positions. My recollection is 6 or 7 of those. Have they all been filled? Have they all been hired?
Through the chair, with there were 3 that were going to be digital evidence management. Those 3 have not been filled. A job offer will be going out for the EDI specialist. The IT person, that process is underway, and I cannot recall what the others were off the top of my head, but I know the 3 digital evidence management ones for sure have not, and that's a byproduct of the rollout of policy and that equipment. That's not my area of expertise. That's more for the deputy and Inspector Disher to speak to. If you want them here for that meeting, I can bring them the next meeting. But the others, the processes are underway or they've been hired.
Thank you for that. So is there a process between chief and CFO to review operating statements at the end of each month?
Sorry, through the chair, like financial statements,
Correct.
quarterly statements, not monthly statements.
May I suggest that you step your game up a bit and do it every month? That way you can report to the board and you don't come in here and get such a rocky ride, being millions of dollars over budget. With respect to the prior budget, which I didn't care for at the time and I care for even less now, I presume, sir, that you have recognized some deficits and you're correcting them in terms of the processes?
Yes, through the chair, yes.
Could you tell me what sort of input chief and CFO have gotten from department heads, or I don't know how the police categorize this subordinate management? So with respect to all the budget lines, are you going to the officers, to the managers, and getting their input in terms of how the budget is put together? So if I understand correctly, that wasn't the case in the last budget?
I beg to differ. Again, I'm not going to speak for CFO Cameron, former CFO Cameron Ali, but he did go out to the different sections. How far down the chain of command, if he went to new constable with 3 months on the job, I don't know, but I know he did definitely go to the different sections. And actually, just I'll turn it over to our current CFO because we're doing this process right now.
So through the chair, on the major element of our budget is obviously the staffing component. We would work with the different units and it would come from the direction of the chief on what we want to present to the board related to staffing. Other elements as part of the budget we are reviewing, specifically related to items like training and software. We're reviewing the needs of the different units. All the other expenses we're trying to maintain as per inflation. So we're trying to restrict the other expenses because we understand the budget is growing at a substantial rate and we're trying to control that.
It's too late in the year to take any positive action to have any impact on this year's budget. What are the lessons learned?
Through the chair, I think a lot of lessons learned. In my experience here over the last 3 to 4 months, I think the biggest lesson learned for me is the need to educate different members of the police service of a proper budget review before they actually start purchasing or indicating any intent to purchase. I think there needs to be a more control set up on what your current budget status is and a review of your any potential budget surpluses or deficits at that point in time. Another element is, as I mentioned, the timekeeping system was extremely outdated, and we have actually just implemented a new system, and it went live on Sunday. We believe that system, we know that system is going to provide enhanced controls and monitoring. Some of the larger police services in the US use the same software. The city of Calgary uses that software, and South Skimco also uses that software. So we believe that software is going to help us monitor and provide oversight to our labor resources, which is the biggest component of our budget.
And one last question. Would you please provide us with a complete line by line, including year-to-date actuals for 2023 to your latest production?
Absolutely, through the chair.
Thank you very much.
Further to that, we need the previous years as well, so that we have the comparison. And something like licenses and software, do you not set prices in multi-year contracts for that kind of thing?
So through the chair, yes, we would. I know, so I believe this happened last year where Microsoft came to us with a rather large price increase of almost 20%. That was probably not forecasted, but that's something that happened throughout industry. Sometimes you get into a position where the software becomes embedded in your enterprise system and you're effectively forced to pay that increase. Microsoft is a great example. No office environment that I've seen that doesn't use Microsoft products, not effectively at least. And most industry and employers would have to bear that cost of that 20% increase.
Okay. And with other software, do you shop around when there's a big increase like that?
Through the chair, I don't have experience at the police service board to actually say, services to actually say if we shop around. I would always advocate for them to shop around, especially if there is a potential other option. So I would, as a CFO for the organization, I would definitely push back in my position to ensure that there's a business case for any software renewal or new purchase.
Actually, and through the chair, if I can just add to that, policing is a culture that does not like change. And so you've been privy to some of these conversations. I won't say the vendors, it's not appropriate. But the minute there's a discussion about we should consider looking at another option, quite often you'll hear from the membership, oh, we can't do that. So I, like the CFO, really do encourage that we look at what are the other options out there. Competition is healthy, but in the police, my experience in the police environment is then you get a lot of pushback internally because they're not comfortable with going with the new vendor. But that is something that I do advocate for as well as the CFO, that we look at other providers.
Okay. And did staff manage to catch all the issues that we didn't get answers for?
Okay, so through the chair, just one other comment about the lessons learned. And again, I mean, no disrespect to anyone, but the police service has grown, the demands on the police service has grown, yet the financial section was wearing many, many, many hats that blurred human resources, sort of a postmaster, quartermaster, finance. And so the effort was started by the former CFO and is being continued by our current CFO, that finance is a finance unit with the appropriate professionals with the skills and education to take on a financial, the financial functions, rather than having 15 things on the corner of their desk and trying to do the finance function. So that's the other lesson learned, and that we're striving towards, is actually having finance be financed with the appropriate people in there. And we've made a couple of key acquisitions. Fortunately, they came from the city, so they know the systems, and that will definitely help us as well.
Okay. And when you come back next month, I'd like a proper explanation of the budgeting error that you claim is a big source of the problem.
Through the chair, absolutely. And then I'm not sure how we make this request, but I would like, if he's available and willing to do it, I would like, former CFO, Cameron Ali to join us. Because a lot of these questions that I think we need his input on. So I'm not sure if I need the board's, this committee's approval for that or what the process is.
Would there be a cost for that?
No, it'd be virtually. I would ask him to beam in virtually.
I think that would be appropriate. I see no objection by anybody in the committee. Okay, Counselor Caputo, would you like to move your referral to have this come back next month?
Yes, I would.
You have a
So-
seconder? Mayor Davis? Okay, any comments on the referral? Seeing none, we'll call the question.
Thank you. The deferral carried on a recorded vote of 5-0. All those voting in favor are Councilors Van Tilburg, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, and Mayor Davis.
Okay, with that, there are no notices motions, so we are adjourned. Thank you.